The knock came at twilight, low, resonant, like a drumbeat from the earth itself. Daniel wasn't expecting visitors. He wasn't expecting anything, really, except another quiet evening fading into night. He opened the back door, expecting to see a stray cat or maybe a raccoon. What he found was a giant sloth. It stood twice as tall as a man, its fur matted and mossy, claws the size of dinner plates. Its eyes, black and fathomless, regarded him with an ancient, unblinking stare. Daniel simply stood there, caught between disbelief and a strange sense of calm. The sloth, with agonizing slowness, raised one furry arm and gestured vaguely towards the woods behind Daniel's house. A low, rumbling growl emanated from the creature's throat, a sound that seemed to vibrate in Daniel's chest. After what felt like an eternity, the sloth turned, its massive body moving with the deliberation of a glacier, and began its lumbering retreat into the shadows. Curiosity, a primal urge that trumped any fear, took root in Daniel's mind. He found himself stepping out onto the porch, the screen door clicking shut behind him. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and pine needles, the fading light painting the woods in shades of deep purple and grey. He followed. The sloth's progress was agonizingly slow, each step a monumental effort. Yet there was a strange rhythm to it, a hypnotic sway that drew Daniel deeper into the woods. The familiar sounds of the forest, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of leaves, seemed to fade, replaced by a low hum that seemed to emanate from the sloth itself. The trees grew closer together, their branches intertwining overhead to form a dense canopy that blotted out the last vestiges of daylight. The air grew cooler, damper, the forest floor soft and springy beneath Daniel's feet. Hours seemed to melt away, or perhaps it was merely minutes. Time itself seemed to bend to the sloth's languid pace. The forest was changing. Familiar oaks and maples gave way to trees with bark that shimmered like opals and leaves that pulsed with an inner light. Flowers bloomed in impossible hues, their petals unfolding in slow, mesmerizing spirals. The air thrummed with a low, constant vibration, a symphony of unseen life forms. Daniel felt a strange detachment from his own body, as if he were observing himself from a great distance. His senses, however, were heightened. Every sight and sound amplified, every breath of air tingling with an almost electric energy. At one point he could have sworn he saw a flock of birds with wings made of stained glass soar through the canopy, their feathers casting a mosaic of colored light upon the forest floor. Was he dreaming? Hallucinating? The line between reality and fantasy blurred, the forest itself becoming a canvas upon which his subconscious painted impossible landscapes. The path, if there ever was one, had long since vanished. They were navigating a labyrinth of towering ferns and bioluminescent fungi, their way lit by the soft, pulsing glow emanating from the sloth's moss-covered fur. Daniel lost all track of time. Hours, days, years could have passed. It all felt the same in this timeless, ever-shifting realm. He felt a strange sense of peace settle over him, a calm acceptance of the surreal and the unknown. He was no longer sure why he was following the sloth, or even who he was, but it didn't seem to matter. He was simply along for the ride, a passenger on a journey through the strange and beautiful landscapes of his own subconscious. He began to see faces in the patterns of bark, hear whispers in the rustling leaves. The forest was alive, sentient, and it was communicating with him in a language he couldn't quite grasp. Section 5. The Forest of Whispers. The trees seemed to thin, revealing a clearing bathed in an ethereal silver light. The source of the light was a giant willow tree, its branches weeping down to the ground, its leaves shimmering like quicksilver. The sloth, for the first time since their journey began, stopped. It let out a low, mournful cry that echoed through the clearing, a sound filled with an almost unbearable sadness. Daniel felt a pang of empathy for the creature, a deep understanding that transcended any language barrier. The sloth was grieving, its sorrow palpable in the very air. As he approached the willow, he noticed that its trunk was not wood, but a tapestry of interwoven vines, each pulsating with a soft internal light. The light intensified as he drew closer, revealing a scene within the tapestry, a glimpse into another world. The scene within the willow's trunk was both beautiful and terrifying. It was a world painted in hues he had never seen before, colors that seemed to exist outside the spectrum of human vision. Strange bioluminescent flora pulsed with an alien life, and creatures that defied description drifted through the air like living constellations. At the center of this alien landscape was a smaller sloth, its fur as white as snow, trapped within a cage of thorny vines. It reached out with a tiny claw, its eyes wide and filled with fear. The giant sloth beside Daniel let out another cry, this one filled with a desperate urgency. This was no ordinary forest, this was a pathway between realities, and the sloth had led him here for a reason. Daniel, compelled by a force he couldn't explain, reached out to touch the willow's trunk. As his fingers brushed against the tapestry of vines, a jolt of energy surged through his body, and the world dissolved around him. He found himself standing on the other side of the tapestry, the air thick and heavy, the sky a swirling vortex of colors he couldn't name. The ground beneath his feet pulsed with an alien life, and the air hummed with a cacophony of sounds, some beautiful, some terrifying. The giant sloth was gone, and in its place stood the smaller sloth, still trapped within its cage of thorns, its eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. The landscape stretched out before him, a surreal dreamscape of impossible flora and fauna. Towering fungi dripped with phosphorescent slime, and creatures that resembled nothing he had ever seen before flitted through the air on wings of iridescent scales. But it was the cage and its occupant that held his attention. He had been brought here for a reason. He could feel it in his bones. He had to help this creature, to reunite it with its parent. As he approached the cage, he noticed that the thorns were not thorns at all, but the elongated claws of some unseen creature, their tips glowing with a sickly green light. The air around the cage crackled with a strange energy, and Daniel could feel a presence, vast and ancient, observing him from the shadows. He understood then. This was not just a cage, it was a trap, and the creature within it was not just a prisoner, but bait, a test. He did not know for whom or for what purpose, but he knew he could not leave the sloth to its fate. He reached out, ignoring the prickling sensation on his skin, and touched the claws. They were cold, hard, and unyielding. He pulled, but they wouldn't budge. He could feel the presence drawing closer, its attention now fully focused on him. He had to act fast. Closing his eyes, Daniel focused on the memory of the giant sloth, its sorrow, its desperation. He thought of the willow tree, its shimmering leaves, the tapestry of light, and the feeling of energy surging through him. He thought of home. When he opened his eyes, he was back in the clearing. The willow tree still stood, its leaves shimmering, but the portal within its trunk was gone. The giant sloth was nowhere to be seen, but he could feel its presence lingering in the air, a sense of peace and gratitude washing over him. He had done what he could. He never spoke of his journey to anyone. Who would believe him? But sometimes, late at night, when the wind whispered through the trees, he could almost hear the echo of the giant sloth's mournful cry, a reminder of the strange and beautiful world that lay hidden just beyond the veil of reality. And he knew with a certainty that defied all logic that somewhere out there a mother and child had been reunited.